A single mother spent her last dollar on a scratch ticket inside a convenience store. The billionaire standing right behind her watched her win $250,000. Then he said two words that changed everything. "That's mine." He didn't want the money. He didn't want the ticket. He didn't even know she existed 5 minutes ago. But those two words set off a chain of events that would expose a truth about both of them, one that neither poverty nor wealth could have prepared them to face. 32-year-old Keisha Morgan opened her eyes at 4:47 in the morning, not because an alarm woke her, because her body had learned that sleep was a luxury she could only afford in fragments. 4 hours here, 3 hours there. Never enough. Always interrupted by the math running on a loop inside her skull. Rent. $14.50 a month for a studio apartment in Dorchester that smelled like old radiator dust and the neighbors' cigarettes through the walls. Childcare. $860 a month for Zuri's spot at Tiny Steps Learning Center on Blue Hill Avenue. Utilities. Phone bill. Bus pass. The numbers never stopped. She sat up slowly. Her shoulders ached from scrubbing hotel bathroom floors 6 hours the day before. Her hands were cracked along the knuckles, red and raw from industrial cleaning chemicals that the hotel provided in bulk but never paired with decent gloves. Her eyes burned from the kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep, because it lives deeper than muscles. It lives in the bones. Keisha worked 2 jobs. Mornings at the Courtyard Marriott in Back Bay, cleaning rooms from 6 to noon. Evenings at the Walgreens on Columbia Road, running the register from 5 to close. Combined income after taxes, roughly $2,100 a month. After rent, childcare, electricity, phone, and the bus pass that got her between both jobs, she had almost nothing left. Most months, exactly nothing. She stood and moved quietly across the dim studio. 1 room. A kitchenette along the wall. A bathroom barely wide enough to turn around in. And in the corner on a mattress pushed against the floor because the bed frame broke 3 months ago and she couldn't afford to replace it, Zuri slept. 5 years old. Curled on her side. Arms wrapped tight around a stuffed bear named Honey whose fur had gone flat from years of love. Zuri's braids were still neat from Sunday. Her small chest rose and fell in that perfect rhythm only children have. The rhythm of someone who trusts the world completely because their mother has made sure they never had reason not to. Keisha knelt beside her, pressed her lips to Zuri's forehead. Warm skin, soft breath. This was the moment that made everything bearable. Not worth it. That phrase felt too clean for what this was. Just bearable. Just enough to keep going. She moved to the kitchen, opened the cabinet. 1 banana, 2 slices of bread. She arranged them on a paper plate with a small cup of water and left them on the counter where Zuri would find them when she woke up. Keisha wouldn't eat this morning. She hadn't eaten breakfast in 11 days. But Zuri would never know that. She grabbed her wallet from the shelf by the door, opened it, counted what was inside even though she already knew. $1 bill, 1 nickel, 2 pennies, $1.07. Payday was tomorrow, Friday, 27 hours away. 1 more day to survive on nothing. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up. A text message from Tiny Steps Learning Center. The words hit her like cold water. Reminder. Your account is past due. Balance owed $340. If payment is not received within 7 days, we will be unable to hold Zuri's enrollment spot. Keisha stared at the screen. Her jaw tightened, her throat closed, because she understood what this message actually said beneath the polite language. No childcare means no work. No work means no rent. No rent means no home. The spiral didn't need to be explained to her. She'd been circling the drain for 14 months. This was just the water pulling harder. She put the phone in her pocket, zipped her jacket, looked back at Zuri one more time, sleeping, safe, unaware that her mother was holding their entire world together with hands that were literally cracking open. Keisha locked the door behind her and walked into the dark. Keisha Morgan was not born into this. That's the part people never see when they look at someone struggling. They see the present tense, the cleaning uniform, the cracked hands, the exhaustion carved into every line of the face. They don't see the before. 3 years ago, Keisha had a career. A real one. She was a certified medical assistant at a private clinic in Roxbury. $12 above minimum wage, health benefits, a predictable schedule. She wore scrubs that fit and sneakers that weren't falling apart. She had a savings account with $4,000 in it, not a fortune, but a floor. Something to stand on if the ground ever shifted. Then the ground didn't just shift, it disappeared. Her boyfriend Darnell left when she was 7 months pregnant. No warning, no argument. Just a note on the kitchen counter and an empty closet where his clothes used to be. 3 sentences. I can't do this. I'm not ready. Don't call me. She didn't call him. She didn't have time. She had a baby coming, and a lease she now carried alone. Zuri arrived 3 weeks early. The delivery was complicated. Postpartum hemorrhaging kept Keisha in the hospital for 6 days. Recovery took 4 months. 4 months she couldn't work. 4 months without a paycheck. The clinic replaced her after 8 weeks. They called it restructuring. She called it what it was. She was gone and the world kept spinning without her. The savings lasted 6 months. Then the math caught up the way it always does. In America, nearly 1 in 4 single mothers live below the poverty line. The average cost of childcare in Massachusetts exceeds $16,000 per year, more than in-state college tuition. For women like Keisha, the math of survival doesn't add up. It was never designed to. She applied to 9 clinics after recovering, 3 interviews, 0 callbacks, the gap in her resume, the lack of reliable childcare to guarantee full-time availability, the invisible stamp that poverty puts on a person before they even open their mouth. Employers smelled instability the way animals smell fear, and they responded the same way, by keeping their distance. So Keisha took what she could get. A cleaning job at the Marriott, a cashier shift at Walgreens. 2 jobs that paid less combined than her single position at the clinic. 2 jobs that required twice the hours and left her with none of the dignity she used to carry without thinking about it. But she never stopped. That was the thing about Keisha that numbers on a page couldn't capture. She didn't have the luxury of bitterness. Bitterness required energy she couldn't afford, so she replaced it with motion. With routine, with the mechanical discipline of a woman who had decided that falling apart was simply not an option available to her. She had never asked anyone for money. She had never missed a single shift at either job. She had never let Zuri see her cry. Not once. Not in 14 months of watching everything she'd built dissolve like salt in rain. She just kept moving. Kept cleaning rooms. Kept scanning barcodes. Kept making 1 banana and 2 slices of bread look like a real breakfast on a paper plate. Kept pretending the floor beneath her wasn't made of glass. The Quick Mart on Newbury Street sat wedged between a dry cleaner and a nail salon at the corner, where the neighborhood shifted from polished to practical. Neon beer signs buzzed in the front window. The overhead lights hummed that flat fluorescent hum that makes everything look slightly worse than it is. A rotating hot dog grill near the counter turned the same 4 hot dogs it had been turning since morning. The smell of old coffee mixed with floor cleaner and the faint sweetness of lottery ticket ink. Keisha pushed through the glass door at 12:19 in the afternoon. Her shift at the Marriott had ended 12 minutes ago. She had 4 hours and 41 minutes before her shift at Walgreens started. In between, she needed to pick up Zuri from childcare, feed her something, drop her with the neighbor, who watched her for free on Thursday evenings in exchange for Keisha doing her laundry on Sundays. A system built entirely on favors and fragile trust. But first, water. She was dehydrated from 6 hours of scrubbing without a break. Her throat felt like sandpaper. She walked to the cooler at the back and pulled out a bottle of water. 99 cents. She could afford exactly this. She carried it to the counter. That's when she saw them. The scratch tickets, lined up in a neat row behind the register. Bright colors, gold foil, names designed to sound like promises. Lucky Stars, Cash Blast, $1 million fortune, each one $1, each one a door to a different life. Or more accurately, each one a lie wrapped in hope and sold for the price of a bottle of water. Keisha knew better. She'd heard it before. Lottery is a tax on the poor. She'd read it in a waiting room magazine once, nodded along. agreed with it intellectually. She was not a gambler. She was not irrational. She was a woman with a medical assistant certification and a 4.0 GPA from her training program who had done everything right and still ended up holding 99 cents in a convenience store, trying to decide if she deserved to drink water today. Economists call it the lottery paradox. The poorer you are, the higher percentage of your income you spend on lottery tickets. Not because the poor are foolish, because when every rational option has failed, you irrational hope becomes the only door left unlocked. Keisha stood at the counter, the water in one hand, her eyes on the scratch tickets, $1.07 in her wallet. The water was 99 cents plus tax. That left nothing. Or she could put the water back and buy a $1 scratch ticket and have 7 cents left and still be thirsty. But maybe, just maybe, 14 months. 14 months of doing everything right and watching it not matter. 14 months of choosing the responsible option every single time and ending up in the exact same place. Broke. Exhausted. Alone. Running out of time on a childcare bill she couldn't pay. What if? 2 words. The most dangerous words in the English language when you have nothing left. And the only words that keep people alive when everything else has gone quiet. She put the water back on the shelf. Her hand trembled as she pointed to the row of scratch tickets. 1 lucky stars, please. The kid behind the counter. Maybe 1920. Name tag, said Devon. He looked at her. Not with judgment. Not with pity. Just with the tired recognition of someone who'd watched 100 people make this exact choice. He pulled the ticket from the roll and slid it across the counter. Keisha placed her last dollar bill on the glass. Exact change would have been cleaner, but she needed the 7 cents back. Devon rang it up, handed her the ticket and a nickel and 2 pennies in change. Outside the store window, a black Bentley Continental pulled into the parking space closest to the entrance. The engine went silent. A door opened. A man's shoe-polished leather hand-stitched sole touched the pavement, but Keisha didn't see any of that. She was already walking to the far corner of the store, near the napkin dispenser and the ATM that charged a $3 fee. She held the ticket flat against the counter ledge. Her fingers shook. She tried to scratch the silver coating with her thumbnail, but her hands wouldn't cooperate. Too much adrenaline, too much fear, too much writing on a piece of cardboard that cost $1 and probably paid nothing. She found a penny in her pocket, pressed it against the first panel, and began to scratch. 45-year-old Jamal Williams had not set foot inside a convenience store in over 3 years. His assistant handled coffee, his driver handled gas, his executive chef handled meals. The small transactions of ordinary life had been quietly removed from his daily experience, like furniture from a room he no longer visited. Williams Capital Group, a real estate investment empire valued at $4.2 billion. 37 commercial properties across the eastern seaboard, 2,000 employees. A corner office on the 42nd floor of a tower in the financial district with views that stretched from Boston Harbor to the Blue Hills on a clear day. Jamal built all of it from nothing. That was the part the business magazines loved to print. Self-made, up from poverty, the American dream in a tailored suit. And it was true, every word. He grew up in Mattapan, 3 rooms, peeling paint, a kitchen window that didn't close all the way so in winter you could see your breath while you ate dinner. His mother, Lorraine Williams, worked 3 jobs. Housekeeping at a hospital before dawn, cashier at a grocery store during the day, cleaning offices downtown at night. She left the house before Jamal woke up and came home after he was supposed to be asleep. But he was never asleep. He'd sit at the kitchen table doing homework under the one light that worked, waiting to hear her key in the lock, waiting to know she made it home safe. That was his childhood. Not baseball, not video games, just a boy at a table listening for a key. Lorraine died when Jamal was 19. Heart failure. The doctors used clinical language, cardiomyopathy, chronic stress response, but Jamal knew the real diagnosis: exhaustion. She worked herself to death so her children wouldn't have to. The last thing she said to him. He remembered it the way you remember a scar. Not the moment of the cut, but the shape it left behind. Don't you ever forget where you started, baby? The moment you forget, you become everything we survived. He hadn't forgotten. Not exactly. The memory was still there. But somewhere in the 26 years between her death and this Thursday afternoon, the memory had shifted from a compass to a photograph. Something he could look at, but no longer follow. He donated millions to charities. He funded scholarships. He wrote checks to shelters every December. But he wrote them from his office. He never visited. He never looked anyone in the eye. He never sat across from someone who reminded him of his mother and actually stayed long enough to feel it. His mother's voice had become background noise, the kind you hear every day until one morning you realize you've stopped listening entirely. Today, he was on Newbury Street for a real estate walkthrough, a commercial block his team was evaluating for redevelopment. Boutique retail, high-end dining. The kind of neighborhood transformation that turned corner stores into craft cocktail bars and priced out everyone who'd lived there for decades. His driver parked the Bentley outside the Quick Mart. Jamal told him he'd be 2 minutes, just a coffee. He straightened his tie, a charcoal Tom Ford suit, $3,200. Cufflinks his late mother would have needed 3 months of paychecks to afford. He pushed through the glass door. The neon hummed. The hot dogs turned. The fluorescent light made everything look slightly worse than it was. And in the far corner of the store, a woman in a wrinkled cleaning uniform was scratching a lottery ticket with a penny. Her hands were shaking. Jamal didn't notice her. Not yet. He walked to the coffee station and poured himself a medium roast in a paper cup. $6.50 with tax. He carried it to the register, got in line behind the only other customer waiting. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar. 12:45. Walk through at 1. He had time. Then something made him look up. Not a sound, not a movement, just a shift in the air the way the room changes when someone stops breathing for a second. He glanced toward the corner. The woman was completely still, the penny frozen in her hand, her eyes locked on the ticket. And something in the way she stood, the rigid stillness of someone afraid to blink, because the world might rearrange itself if they do. It reminded him of something he hadn't thought about in years. His mother, standing at the kitchen counter, holding an envelope, staring at a number, the same stillness, the same disbelief, the same terror of hoping. Jamal's chest tightened, a feeling he hadn't felt in so long he almost didn't recognize it. Not sympathy, not curiosity, recognition. He looked at the woman's shoes, black work sneakers, worn at the heel, the same kind his mother used to wear. The same kind that cost $19 at Payless and lasted 4 months if you were careful. His mother's voice flickered somewhere in the back of his mind. Faint, almost inaudible, like a radio station you've driven too far from but haven't turned off yet. Don't you ever forget where you started. Jamal paid for his coffee, $6.50 for a medium roast in a paper cup. He didn't think about the price. He never thought about prices. That was the distance wealth created, not just from poverty but from the act of counting itself. He stepped away from the register, and that's when the distance between him and the woman in the corner became something he could feel. 4 feet, maybe 5. He stood holding a coffee that cost more than her entire purchase. She stood holding a scratch ticket that cost everything she had. He noticed her shoes first. Black work sneakers, scuffed at the toe, worn flat at the heel where the sole had thinned to almost nothing. He knew those shoes. Not that exact pair, but that exact type. The kind that cost $19 and lasted 4 months. The kind his mother wore every single day until the rubber split and she'd glue them back together with adhesive from the dollar store because new shoes meant one less bag of groceries. Then he noticed her hands, red across the knuckles, cracked along the fingers. The skin between her thumb and forefinger was raw and peeling, chemical burns, the kind you get from industrial cleaning solutions when nobody gives you proper gloves. Then he noticed the way she held the ticket, both hands, pressed flat against the counter ledge like a prayer she was ashamed of making. There was something sacred and something broken in the way her fingers gripped that tiny piece of cardboard, like it was the last match in a dark room. Jamal didn't move. He stood by the coffee station with his cup growing warm against his palm and watched. Not the way you watch a stranger in passing, not the polite glance that costs nothing and means less. He watched the way you watch something that wakes up a part of you that's been sleeping for too long. For the first time in years, Jamal Williams actually looked at another human being. Not through the windshield of a Bentley, not across a conference table, not on a screen in a quarterly report about demographics and market opportunity. He looked at her the way his mother used to look at people, like they mattered simply because they were there. Keisha didn't know anyone was watching. She didn't know a man worth $4.2 billion was standing close enough to hear her breathe. She picked up a penny from the small dish beside the register, the one that said, "Take a penny, leave a penny." She pressed it against the first silver panel on the Lucky Stars ticket. The sound of copper scraping against coated cardboard filled the quiet store. A small sound, the kind of sound that disappears into the noise of any normal day. But in that moment it was the loudest thing in the room. Scratch, pause, scratch, pause. Keisha's breathing shortened, her jaw tightened. The penny moved to the second panel, then the third. The first number appeared, then the second. Then Keisha's hands stopped shaking. They went completely still. She stared at the ticket. The penny slipped from her fingers and clinked against the counter ledge before rolling to the floor. She didn't pick it up. She didn't move. She didn't blink. The third panel was already scratched. 3 matching symbols. 3 gold stars aligned in a perfect row. Below them, printed in small black ink that her eyes had to adjust to read clearly, was a number. $250,000. Keisha read it once, then again, then a third time. Her lips moved silently, forming each digit like a word in a language she'd forgotten. $250,000. Her hands started trembling again. But this was different from before. Before, her hands shook from fear, from the weight of choosing between water and hope. Now they shook from something she hadn't felt in so long her body didn't know how to hold it. Disbelief. Relief. Terror that this wasn't real. Terror that it was. Tears fell before she understood she was crying. They dropped onto the counter, onto the ticket. She wiped them, quickly panicked that moisture might smear the ink, might erase the numbers, might undo whatever impossible thing had just happened. 14 months. 14 months of counting every penny, of choosing between medicine and meals, of lying to Zuri that Mama already ate. And now this piece of paper, this impossibly thin piece of paper, held a number that could end all of it. Devin behind the counter leaned forward. "You okay, Miss?" Keisha couldn't speak. She lifted the ticket toward him with both hands, the way you'd hold something fragile, something holy. Devin looked at the numbers. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came for a full second. Then he exhaled the words like he'd been holding his breath too. "Oh my God, you won. You actually won." A man near the magazine rack looked over. A woman refilling her soda turned around. Devin's voice had cracked the silence in the store like a stone through glass. Keisha heard herself speak, not the words she expected, not "I'm rich," not "I can't believe it." The first words that came out of her mouth, the very first sentence she formed in the most important moment of her life, were about her daughter. "I can pay the childcare. I can keep my baby in school." That was it. That was what $250,000 meant to Keisha Morgan. Not a new car, not a vacation, not freedom in the abstract, just Zuri, just safety, just one more day where her child didn't have to pay the price for her mother's circumstances. She pressed the ticket against her chest, held it there with both palms, and for the first time in 14 months, she let herself breathe all the way out. The store felt different now. Warmer, brighter, like the fluorescent lights had shifted from cold to something almost kind. Devin was smiling. The woman with the soda said, "Congratulations, honey," from across the aisle. The man near the magazines nodded. Small kindnesses from strangers who had witnessed something rare. Genuine luck landing on someone who genuinely needed it. Keisha wiped her face with the back of her hand, steadied herself. She had questions, practical ones. How do you claim a prize this size? Where do you go? What do you bring? She turned back toward the register ticket still pressed to her body and took 2 steps toward Devin. Where do I go to get? I've never done this before. Devin pulled out a pamphlet from under the counter. Massachusetts State Lottery claim instructions. He was pointing at an address on the back when Jamal's phone rang. Jamal had been standing near the coffee station the entire time, watching, silent. The phone vibrated against his thigh, and he answered without thinking. His assistant, Natasha, Mr. Williams. I need to confirm the walkthrough location. Which property are you at right now? Jamal glanced through the store's front window. The Quick Mart sign glowed in neon above the entrance. This was one of the locations his company had acquired 3 months earlier. A chain of 14 convenience stores bundled into a commercial real estate package across Greater Boston. He hadn't visited any of them personally. They were line items on a spreadsheet. Revenue projections, square footage calculations. That's mine, Jamal said into the phone. Casual, matter of fact, the way you'd confirm an address to someone who already knows the answer. The Quick Mart on Newbury. I'm inside right now. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at Keisha. He didn't even know she could hear him. He was answering a question about property ownership from a woman sitting in an office 12 miles away. But Keisha heard 2 words, just 2, and they detonated in her chest like a bomb. That's mine. She froze. The pamphlet Devin was holding fell from his fingers. Keisha turned slowly. The man behind her, tall, charcoal suit, polished shoes, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, looking right past her as if she wasn't there. That's mine. Every muscle in her body locked. The ticket was still pressed against her chest. Her fingers curled tighter around it. Instinct. The same instinct that made her wrap her arms around Zuri in the dark when the apartment got too cold and the blankets weren't enough. Protective. Primal. The store went silent. Devin's smile vanished. The woman with the soda set her cup down slowly. The man near the magazines lowered his phone. Keisha's voice came out quiet. Controlled. Shaking at the edges, but not breaking. I bought this ticket. With my money. My last dollar. I stood right here, and you watched me buy it. Jamal blinked. He pulled the phone away from his ear, looked at her, looked at the ticket pressed against her chest, looked at Devin, whose face had gone pale behind the register, looked at the other customers whose expressions had shifted from warmth to suspicion to something harder. What? Jamal said. Genuine confusion. Not the rehearsed confusion of a man caught in a lie, but the raw bewilderment of someone who had walked into the middle of a story he didn't know was being told. You just said it. The man near the magazine stepped closer, arms crossed. 6'3", voice like gravel. We all heard you. You said that's mine. She was holding her ticket, and you said that's mine. No, I was on a phone call. I was talking to my assistant about the building. I own this store. The property. I wasn't talking about any ticket. You own this store, Devin repeated slowly. The words hung in the air like smoke. Keisha's eyes narrowed. You own this store. So you own everything in it, the lottery tickets too. That's not how it works. Jamal started, but the sentence dissolved before he could finish it because the room wasn't listening to logic. The room was listening to optics. A man in a $3,000 suit. A woman in a cleaning uniform. A winning ticket. And 2 words that landed at exactly the wrong moment. In America, when a man in a $3,000 suit speaks, people listen. When a woman in a cleaning uniform speaks, people decide. The gap between being heard and being judged is often just the fabric on your back. The woman with the soda had her phone out now, filming, holding it sideways, red light blinking. Somebody should call the police, she said loudly. This man is trying to take this woman's ticket. I'm not taking anything, Jamal said. His voice was steady, but something underneath it cracked. He reached for his phone to call Natasha back, to have her confirm the call to prove what he'd actually said. He pressed the power button. Nothing. Black screen. Dead battery. The man near the magazines moved closer, positioned himself between Jamal and the register, between Jamal and Keisha, a wall of denim and righteous anger. I don't care who you were calling, the man said. I don't care what you own. She bought that ticket. I watched her scratch it with my own eyes. You want to take something from a woman who looks like she's been through hell just to get here today. Jamal opened his mouth, closed it. His mother's voice cut through the noise. Not a whisper this time. Not background static. Clear. Present. Urgent. Don't you ever forget where you started, baby. He looked at Keisha. Really looked. The way he'd looked at her from the coffee station moments ago, but different now. Closer. Sharper. He saw the work shoes worn to nothing. the cracked hands, the uniform with a hotel logo on the chest, the eyes of a woman who had been fighting for so long that even joy came wrapped in fear. He saw his mother, standing in a grocery store checkout line, counting coins from a Ziploc bag, while the cashier sighed. The same rigid spine, the same refusal to look away, the same dignity held together with nothing but will. Somewhere outside a siren grew louder, then stopped. Car doors opened and closed. Footsteps on pavement. 2 Boston police officers pushed through the glass door of the Quick Mart, radios crackling, hands near their belts. Someone called about a dispute, the first officer said, scanning the room. His eyes moved from Jamal's suit to Keisha's uniform and made a calculation in under 2 seconds. The kind of calculation that happens before the conscious mind even starts. What's going on here? The first officer looked at Devon. You got cameras in here. Devon nodded quickly. Yes, sir. Right there. He pointed to a small monitor mounted behind the register. Black and white footage. 4 angles. Timestamp running in the corner. Pull it up, the officer said. Last 30 minutes. Devon's fingers moved across the keyboard beneath the counter. The screen flickered. Rewound. The timestamp scrolled backward. 12:19, 12:15, 12:12. He hit play. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. Top-down angle from a camera mounted above the register. You could see the entire store. The coffee station, the counter, the lottery ticket display, the front door. Everyone watched. Keisha, Jamal, the 2 officers. Devon, the tall man with his arms still crossed. The woman who had been filming. All of them staring at a small screen behind a convenience store counter like it was a courtroom exhibit. The footage showed Keisha entering the store at 12:19, walking to the cooler, pulling out a bottle of water, carrying it to the counter, pausing, looking at the scratch tickets, putting the water back, pointing to the Lucky Stars display. Devon pulling a ticket, Keisha placing a $1 bill on the counter, taking the ticket, walking to the far corner. At 12:22, the front door opened again. Jamal walked in, went straight to the coffee station, poured a cup, carried it to the register, stood in line, 6 feet from Keisha, never once moving toward the lottery display, never once touching the counter where the tickets were kept, never once looking in her direction until after she had already scratched the ticket and stopped moving. Then the moment. 12:29. Jamal's phone pressed to his ear, his mouth moving. 2 words. The camera didn't have audio, but it didn't need it. You could see exactly what happened. His body angled toward the window. His free hand gesturing vaguely at the storefront. His eyes looking through the glass. At the sign outside. Not at Keisha. Not at the ticket. At the building. He was talking about the building. The first officer straightened up, looked at Jamal, looked at Keisha. Seems pretty clear to me. He was on the phone. Wasn't talking to you, ma'am. The room shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, just a slow, quiet unraveling of everything that had been coiled tight for the past 10 minutes. The tall man uncrossed his arms, took a half step back. The woman with the phone lowered it to her side. Devon exhaled, and Keisha stood completely still, the ticket pressed to her chest, her eyes fixed on the screen where the footage was still playing. She watched herself point to the scratch tickets, watched herself place her last dollar on the counter, watched Jamal walk in behind her and never come within arm's reach of anything she touched. The shame hit her like a wave she didn't see coming. Not the ordinary kind. Not the kind that comes from saying something wrong at a party or tripping in public. This was deeper, heavier. The kind of shame that lives in the space between what you did and why you did it. She had accused a man in front of strangers. She had called him a thief with her eyes and her voice and her fear. And he hadn't done anything except stand in the wrong place at the wrong time and say 2 words into a phone. But she knew why she'd done it. That was the worst part. She knew exactly why. Because 14 months of losing everything had rewired her nervous system to treat every unexpected moment as a threat. Because when you've been knocked down enough times, you start swinging before anyone even raises a fist. Because $250,000 was Zuri's future, and she would have fought a hurricane to protect it. Her chin trembled. Her eyes burned. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words got stuck somewhere between her throat and her pride. Jamal watched her. He didn't move, didn't cross his arms, didn't check his phone. He just stood there. And when Keisha finally looked up at him, expecting anger, expecting cold dismissal, expecting the kind of response a man with $4.2 billion gives to a woman who just publicly humiliated him in a convenience store, she found something she wasn't prepared for: gentleness. "It's okay," Jamal said. "Quiet, steady, no edge, no performance. You have every right to protect what's yours. I would have done the same thing." 5 words. 5 ordinary, unremarkable words. But to a woman who hadn't heard kindness from a stranger in 14 months, they landed like oxygen after drowning. The officers closed their notepads. "No crime here," the second one said. "Just a misunderstanding. Congratulations on the ticket, ma'am." They walked out. The bell above the door chimed behind them. The tall man mumbled something that might have been an apology and left. The woman with the phone slipped out without a word. Devin busied himself straightening things behind the counter. And then it was just the two of them, Keisha and Jamal, standing in a convenience store that suddenly felt very large and very quiet. Keisha spoke first, her voice raw. "I'm sorry. I thought you were trying to take it. I heard you say those words, and I reacted." "You don't owe me an apology," Jamal said. "You owe yourself a little grace. You were protecting your daughter. That's not something to be ashamed of." Keisha blinked. "How did you know I have a daughter?" Jamal paused. For the first time since the whole thing started, something shifted behind his eyes. Something older than this moment. Something that had been sitting in the back room of his memory for 26 years gathering dust. "Because of the way you held that ticket," he said slowly, both hands pressed to your chest, like it wasn't about the money, like it was about someone else. He swallowed. "My mother used to hold her paycheck the same way. Every Friday, she'd come home from her third job, and she'd stand in the kitchen and hold that envelope against her chest before she even opened it, like it was the only thing standing between her children and the dark." Keisha stared at him. The suit, the cufflinks, the polished shoes, and now these words coming out of his mouth that didn't match any of it. "Your mother worked 3 jobs, she asked quietly. Jamal nodded. "Housekeeping, cashier, office cleaning, Mattapan." "You know the neighborhood," Keisha almost laughed. "I live in Dorchester." "Then you know," Jamal said. And those 2 words carried more understanding than any speech he'd ever given in a boardroom. He looked down at the floor. The linoleum tiles, scuffed from 1,000 shoes. "She died when I was 19. Heart failure. The doctors had a fancy word for it. I had a simpler one. She was tired. She worked herself to death because nobody helped her. Nobody saw her. Not really." He looked back up at Keisha. "The last thing she ever said to me was, 'Don't you ever forget where you started. The moment you forget, you become everything we survived.'" He paused. "I forgot. Not all at once, but slowly. Year by year, deal by deal, I built a company worth $4.2 billion, and somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing people like my mother. I donated money, but I never looked anyone in the eye. I wrote checks to shelters, but I never walked inside one." His voice dropped. "And then I walked into this store to buy a cup of coffee, and I saw you scratch that ticket. And something in the way you stood there reminded me of her so clearly it felt like being punched in the chest." Keisha's eyes were wet. Not from shame anymore, from something else. Recognition. The strange, disorienting experience of being truly seen by someone who has no reason to see you. "I own this building," Jamal continued. "That's what I was telling my assistant on the phone. That's mine meant this store, this property. Nothing to do with your ticket. That ticket is yours. Your luck, your choice, your future." Keisha looked at the ticket still pressed against her body, then at Jamal, then at the empty store around them. 2 people who had been strangers 20 minutes ago, who had been adversaries 10 minutes ago, who were now standing in the aftermath of a misunderstanding that had cracked something open in both of them. She didn't know what to say. Neither did he. So they stood there, in the silence, in the fluorescent hum, in the space between 2 worlds that had collided over 2 words and a $1 scratch ticket. "Can I ask you something?" Jamal said after a moment that lasted longer than it should have. Keisha nodded. "That ticket. Why a scratch ticket? You could have bought water, food, Anything practical? Why this? The question landed differently than she expected. Not like judgment, not like curiosity wrapped in condescension. It sounded like someone genuinely trying to understand, like someone who actually wanted to know. Keisha looked at the Lucky Stars logo on the ticket in her hands. Gold foil, bright letters, a $1 promise that had somehow paid off. Because everything practical has been failing me for 14 months, she said. Her voice was steady now. Quiet, but steady. I've done everything right. I worked 2 jobs. I saved every penny I could. I planned. I budgeted. I skipped meals so my daughter could eat. And it still wasn't enough. The bills still came. The notices still piled up. The math still didn't work. She looked up at him. That dollar was my last one. Literally the last dollar I had in the world until tomorrow. And I stood at that counter holding a bottle of water in one hand and looking at those tickets with the other. And I decided. Just once. Just this once. I wanted to bet on something impossible instead of something guaranteed to fall short. Jamal didn't respond immediately. He stood very still. Because her words had reached a place inside him that business meetings and quarterly reports never touched. Not because what she said was new, because it was old, ancient, familiar. His mother. Standing in a gas station on Blue Hill Avenue, zipping open her purse, pulling out the tip money from her cleaning shift. $3 and some change. Buying a scratch ticket with the last of it while 19-year-old Jamal stood behind her thinking, "Mama, that's not smart." And Lorraine looking at him with tired eyes and saying the words he'd buried for 2 decades. Sometimes the only prayer left is the kind that costs $1. Researchers call it rational irrationality. When every logical option leads to the same dead end, the human mind doesn't shut down. It pivots. It reaches for the illogical because the logical has already failed. Buying a lottery ticket when you can't afford food isn't foolishness. It's the psychology of survival. It's the last place hope can live when every other room in the house has gone dark. And hope, even irrational hope, is the fuel that gets a person out of bed the next morning. Jamal had built $4.2 billion on rational decisions, calculated risk, data-driven strategy, market analysis, due diligence. But the very first important decision he ever made, the one that started everything, the one that launched the entire trajectory of his life, was irrational. His guidance counselor told him not to bother applying for the scholarship. His teachers said the odds were too long. His mother said she couldn't afford the application fee. And Jamal applied anyway, with money he didn't have. On a chance he shouldn't have taken. Because sometimes the only door left is the one nobody believes is real. 2 women, 25 years apart, standing in 2 different stores, holding 2 different tickets, making the same impossible choice, the same desperate bet, the same prayer disguised as a purchase. Keisha and Lorraine had never met. They never would. But they were connected by something deeper than circumstance, by the kind of resilience that doesn't make headlines, by the quiet, stubborn, invisible strength of women who carry everything and ask for nothing and still somehow find a reason to believe that tomorrow might be different. Jamal felt his throat close. He looked away for a moment, gathered himself, then looked back. My mother said almost the exact same thing once, he said, word for word. They moved outside without either of them suggesting it. It just happened. The store felt too small for what was passing between them, too bright, too watched, even though no one was left inside except Devon pretending to organize the cigarette display. 2 plastic chairs sat outside the Quick Mart entrance, the kind gas stations and corner stores put out for employees on break, white, faded. One had a crack running down the backrest. Jamal sat in that one without thinking about it. Keisha took the other. The afternoon sun had shifted. Warmer now. The kind of late spring light that makes even Newberry Street look softer than it is. Traffic moved in both directions. A bus exhaled at the stop across the street. Somewhere, a dog barked. Keisha spoke first, not because she had something planned to say, because for the first time in over a year someone was sitting next to her who wasn't asking her to explain herself. Not a caseworker, not a landlord, not a childcare administrator with a past due balance on a screen, just a person sitting. Her name is Zuri, Keisha said. She's 5. She thinks butterflies can hear you if you whisper to them. She sings to her stuffed bear every night before bed. His name is Honey. She named him when she was 3 because he's the color of honey, and because that's what I call her. Jamal listened, not the way executives listen, not with half attention and the other half calculating the next move. He listened the way you listen to music you haven't heard since childhood, with your whole body. She starts first grade in the fall, Keisha continued. She doesn't know about the bills. She doesn't know about the eviction notices. She doesn't know I skip dinner so she can have seconds. She just knows Mama goes to work early and comes home late, and there's always breakfast on the counter. I need her to keep believing that. I need her to be a child for as long as I can give her that. Jamal nodded slowly. My mother tried to do the same thing for me. She almost pulled it off. I didn't know we were poor until I was 8 years old, and a kid at school told me my shoes had holes in them. Went home that night and found my mother sitting on the kitchen floor crying into a dish towel. Only time I ever saw her cry. She looked up at me and said, "Baby, I'm sorry. I'm trying. I'm trying so hard." Keisha's breath caught. She pressed her lips together, tight. Every Thursday night was bean soup, Jamal said, because a bag of dried beans cost 89 cents and fed us for 2 days. I hated bean soup. I told her that once. I was maybe 10. She didn't say anything. She just kept stirring the pot. Years later, I realized Thursday was the night before payday. Bean soup wasn't a choice. It was all that was left. Keisha wiped her eyes. Banana and 2 slices of bread. What? That's what I leave Zuri for breakfast. Every morning, a banana and 2 slices of bread. It's all I can afford most days. But I put it on a paper plate, and I make it look nice, like it's a real meal, like everything is fine. Jamal looked at her, really looked, and something settled in his chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. Your mother sounds like she was extraordinary, Keisha said quietly. Jamal felt the words land somewhere deep, in the place where Lorraine's voice had been reduced to background noise for 20 years. In the place where he'd stored her memory like furniture in a room he stopped visiting. She was, he said. And I think I just met someone who reminds me of her. If this story is hitting you right now, take a second to subscribe. We tell stories that remind you the world still has good people in it. Now let's see what happens next. Jamal didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't offer to call someone. He didn't do any of the things billionaires do in stories when they decide to save someone. Instead, he asked a question. What did you do before? Before all this, Keisha looked at him. Suspicious. The kind of suspicion that comes from 14 months of learning that every question from a stranger leads to a door that closes. Why does that matter? Because it does, Jamal said simply. Humor me. Keisha hesitated. Then she answered. Not because she trusted him. Because she was tired of hiding from who she used to be. I was a medical assistant. Certified. Worked at a private clinic in Roxbury for 2 years. Phlebotomy vitals, patient intake, EHR documentation. I was good at it. I was really good at it. What happened? Life happened. I had my daughter. There were complications. I needed 4 months off. The clinic didn't offer paid leave. They replaced me after 8 weeks. By the time I recovered, my savings were gone. My spot was filled, and every clinic I applied to wanted to know why I had a gap in my resume. She said it without bitterness, just facts, the way you describe weather. Jamal was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke, carefully, like a man choosing each word the way you choose where to place your feet on unstable ground. I don't give handouts, he said. My mother taught me that dignity matters more than dollars, but I invest in people. And you just showed me something in the worst possible circumstances. You make good decisions under pressure. That's the rarest skill in business. Rarer than education. Rarer than connections. You can't teach it. Keisha crossed her arms. What exactly are you saying? My company runs a program called Second Start, Workforce Development for Single Parents. We partner with community colleges and healthcare systems across the city. 6 months. Full certification renewal. Childcare covered during the program. Housing assistance while you're enrolled. At the end, job placement with our partner clinics and hospitals. Many large corporations across America run programs like this, workforce reentry initiatives designed to address the gap between poverty and employment. They exist Because companies discovered something that should have been obvious all along. Talent doesn't disappear when someone falls on hard times. It just gets buried under bills. Keisha didn't jump at it. She stared at Jamal the way she stared at the scratch ticket before she bought it. Weighing, calculating, looking for the trap. What's the catch? The catch is, you show up every day. You do the work. You finish the program. That's it. She looked down at the ticket, still pressed against her body. $250,000. A number that had seemed infinite 20 minutes ago. A number that felt different now. I already have this, she said, lifting the ticket slightly. I don't need your program. Jamal nodded. You're right. You don't need it. But let me ask you something. How long will that money last? A long time. Years. Let's do the math, Jamal said. Not condescending. Just direct. $250,000. Massachusetts state tax and federal tax on lottery winnings takes about 25%. That leaves you around $187. You owe $340 on childcare. You've probably got back rent, medical debt, utilities. Let's call it $12,000 in existing debt. That puts you at roughly $140. Divide that by 3 years. That's about $47,000 a year. Average cost of living in Boston is $58,000. You'll be underwater again in 36 months. Keisha's jaw tightened. She hated that the math made sense. She hated that she'd already done a version of it in her head and arrived at the same answer. That money is a bridge, Jamal said, not a destination. It buys you time, but time without a plan is just a longer fall. My program gives you the plan. A career, benefits, paid leave. The kind of stability that doesn't run out. You can have both, he continued, the money and the program, but only one of them will still be there when the other runs out. Keisha stared at him. 30 seconds, maybe longer. The silence between them, filled with the sound of traffic and the distant hum of the store's refrigeration unit. If I say yes, she said slowly, I'm doing it my way. I show up on my terms. I'm not a charity case. I'm not a story for your company newsletter. I'm a mother who needs a job that pays enough to raise her daughter without counting pennies at 4 a.m. Jamal extended his hand. That's exactly what I'm offering. Keisha looked at his hand. Clean, manicured. A watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her annual rent, and she shook it. Firm. No hesitation. The handshake of a woman who had just made a decision, not because someone saved her, because she chose. The first week almost broke her. Keisha sat in a classroom at Roxbury Community College, surrounded by students 10 years younger, fingers flying across laptops, while she struggled to remember medical terminology she hadn't used in nearly 2 years. The instructor moved fast. The material assumed a baseline Keisha had lost somewhere between her 3rd night shift and her 101st skipped meal. She came home that Friday and sat on the kitchen floor of the studio apartment she still couldn't afford, and stared at the ceiling and thought about quitting. The word sat in her mouth like a stone. Easy to say. Impossible to swallow. She didn't quit. Month 2, Zuri got sick. Fever of 103. Vomiting through the night. Keisha missed 4 days of class. The program coordinator called on day 3. Firm voice. Policy is policy. 3 unexcused absences, and you're out. Keisha called Jamal at 11:14 that night. Not for money, not for favors, for time. I need 2 more days, she said. Her voice was raw. Zuri was asleep against her chest, still warm with fever. My daughter is sick. I can't leave her. I'm not asking you to bend the rules. I'm asking you to remember why I'm here. Jamal was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he said, take the week. I'll handle the coordinator. But Keisha, come back. She came back. Monday morning, 8 a.m. Zuri, at tiny steps with a note from the pediatrician. Keisha in the front row with a notebook and a pen, and the rigid determination of a woman who had been given one more chance and would not waste it. Month 4. Exam day. Certified Medical Assistant Examination. Keisha sat at a testing station at Bunker Hill Community College hands, steady for the first time in months. She finished in 47 minutes. Passed with the highest score in her cohort. When the results appeared on screen, she didn't cry. She just exhaled, long and slow, like releasing a breath she'd been holding for 2 years. Month 6. A phone call. Jamaica Plain Family Health Center. Full-time medical assistant position. $42,000 a year. Health insurance. Dental. Vision. Paid sick leave. Paid vacation. 12 days. She almost dropped the phone. Meanwhile, the lottery money moved through her life the way water moves through a filter. Carefully, intentionally, she paid off every debt first. $12,000 gone in one afternoon. The childcare balance. The back rent. The medical bill from Zuri's emergency room visit 8 months ago. Gone. All of it. Then the deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment in Hyde Park. $4,200. 3rd floor. Clean building. Small playground out back. A room for Zuri, with a window that faced east, so the morning light came in soft and gold. $20,000 went into a 529 college savings account in Zuri's name. The rest became an emergency fund, untouched, sitting in a savings account like a promise she made to herself. She treated that money the way her mother taught her to treat everything, with respect, with intention, with the future in mind. Zuri started 1st grade at the Grew Elementary School in Hyde Park that September. Made 2 friends the first week. Brought home a drawing on Friday afternoon. Crayon on white paper. 3 figures. The tallest one had braids and a big smile. That was Mama. The smallest one had a purple dress and was holding something brown and round. That was Zuri holding Honey. And next to them, a little further away, taller, drawn in darker crayon, was a 3rd figure. Standing close, but not too close. Like someone who was there but didn't want to crowd. Keisha looked at it. "Who's that baby?" "That's Mr. Jamal," Zuri said casually, like it was obvious. Like of course he was in the picture. "He's part of us now." Keisha pinned the drawing to the refrigerator with a magnet and stood in the kitchen of her new apartment. Quiet. The floor was still bare. No rug yet, no curtains on the living room window. But the heat worked. The door locked from the inside. And for the first time in 14 months, Keisha Morgan cried. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, not from the weight of holding everything together alone. She cried because the weight had finally mercifully lifted. Even just a little. Even just enough to breathe. 18 months after a scratch ticket and a misunderstanding in a convenience store on Newbury Street, Keisha Morgan walked through the doors of Jamaica Plain Family Health Center, wearing clean scrubs and new work shoes. Not expensive shoes. Not flashy. Just sturdy. Black. Laced tight. The kind that last. She'd been promoted to lead medical assistant after 10 months. Annual salary. $52,000. She managed a team of 4. She trained new hires. She was the first person patients saw when they walked in and the last voice they heard when they called with questions after hours. The clinic director told her once that she had a way of making people feel seen, like they weren't just a chart number, like they mattered. Keisha didn't tell him she knew what it felt like to be invisible. She didn't need to. Zuri was 6 now, reading chapter books before bed, obsessed with butterflies and the solar system. Still sleeping with Honey, though she'd never admit that to her new friends. She had a routine. School aftercare, homework dinner with Mama reading bed. Predictable. Safe. The kind of boring that Keisha would have given anything for 18 months ago. Jamal stayed in their lives. Not as a savior. Not as a love interest. As something harder to name and rarer to find. A friend who showed up. He came to Zuri's school career fair, dressed in a suit that cost more than the PTA's annual budget, and spent 45 minutes explaining to a room full of first graders what an investor does. Zuri introduced him to her teacher as my mom's friend who owns buildings. He sent Zuri a book every month. Not toys. Books. Picture books at first, then early chapter books, each one with a handwritten note on the inside cover. Keep reading. Keep asking questions. The world needs people who think. J.W. One evening in November 18 months, to the week since that Thursday afternoon at the Quick Mart, Keisha and Jamal sat in her living room. Zuri was asleep in her room. The apartment had furniture now. A couch from a second-hand store that Keisha had reupholstered herself. Curtains. A small bookshelf already overflowing with Jamal's monthly deliveries. Honey sat on Zuri's pillow, one ear bent from years of love. Keisha reached into the drawer of the side table and pulled something out. A piece of paper. Faded. Creased. The gold foil had dulled. The scratch marks were still visible. 3 matching stars. The number printed beneath them, barely legible now. The lottery ticket. She held it out to Jamal. "I want you to have this." Jamal looked at it. "You claimed the prize months ago. This is just paper now." "Exactly," Keisha said. "It's just paper. But it's the paper that started everything. You once said, 'That's mine about your store.' But I want this to be yours. Because without that misunderstanding, none of this would have happened. This ticket isn't just mine. It's ours." Jamal took it. Slowly. Held it the way she'd held it that first day. Both hands, careful. Like it weighed more than paper should. He looked at the faded numbers, the scratch marks, the ghost of gold foil, and he thought about a woman in a gas station 26 years ago, buying a ticket with tip money, saying a prayer that cost $1. Keisha wore new shoes now. Still work shoes, still practical, still the kind that lasted. She hadn't changed who she was. She'd just changed where she stood. Jamal slipped the ticket into the inside pocket of his jacket, close to his chest. And in the quiet of that apartment, with a child sleeping in the next room, and the radiator humming its steady warmth, his mother's voice came one last time, not as background noise, not as a distant echo. Clear, present, proud. "Don't you ever forget where you started." And for the first time in 26 years, Jamal answered her. Not out loud, just inside. In the place where her voice had always lived. "I didn't forget, Mama. Someone reminded me." 6 months later, Jamal stood at a podium inside the grand ballroom of the Boston Park Plaza Hotel. 200 people sat before him. Investors, city council members, social workers, journalists, healthcare administrators. And in the second row, wearing scrubs she'd come straight from work in because she didn't have time to change, sat Keisha Morgan. Jamal announced the Lorraine Williams Foundation for Working Parents, named after his mother, funded initially with $12 million from Williams Capital Group, designed to address the exact gaps that had swallowed Keisha and millions of women like her. Subsidized childcare during job training, certification renewal assistance for parents with resume gaps, housing stability support during the transition back to employment, emergency funds for the moments when a child gets sick and a mother has to choose between her job and her kid. Not charity. Infrastructure. The kind of foundation that doesn't just hand someone a fish or teach them to fish. It builds the dock. It clears the water. It makes sure there's a place to stand while you cast the line. Jamal spoke for 11 minutes. Then, he introduced the newest member of the advisory board. Not a policy expert, not a professor, not a corporate consultant. A woman who knew exactly where the system failed because she had fallen through every crack it had. Keisha walked to the podium. Her hands trembled. The same hands that had shaken while scratching a $1 lottery ticket in a convenience store 18 months ago. The same hands that had clutched that ticket to her chest when she thought someone was trying to take it. The same hands that were now gripping the edges of a podium in front of 200 people. She didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. 18 months ago, I stood in a convenience store with $1 and no hope. Today I stand here with a career, a home, and a daughter who thinks butterflies can talk. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Warm. Human. The difference wasn't luck. It wasn't even that scratch ticket. The difference was one person who saw me, not as a charity case, not as a story, not as a statistic, but as someone worth investing in. She paused. There are women sitting in waiting rooms right now, filling out forms that ask them to prove they deserve help. There are mothers choosing between a doctor's visit and a grocery run. There are parents who lost a job because their child had a fever and they didn't have paid leave. These aren't edge cases. This is the system working exactly as it was built, and it was not built for us. This foundation is, and I'm here to make sure it stays that way. The room was silent for a beat. Then it wasn't. Jamal sat in the front row. He didn't clap. He didn't need to. His mother's voice, for the first time in 20 years, wasn't reminding him to remember. It was simply quiet. The way it gets when you've finally done the right thing. 2 years after a $1 scratch ticket and 2 misheard words changed everything. Jamal Williams walked into the Quick Mart on Newbury Street. The bell above the door chimed. The fluorescent lights hummed. The hot dog grill turned its same, slow rotation. Devin was still behind the counter. Older now. A community college textbook open beside the register. He looked up and his face split into a grin. "Hey, you're the guy from the ticket thing." Jamal smiled. "That's me." He poured himself a coffee. $6.50. Walked to the register. Paid. Then he paused. Near the cooler, at the back of the store, a young woman stood, holding a bottle of water. Her eyes kept drifting to the scratch ticket display. She held a crumpled bill in one hand. Her shoes were worn at the heel. Her jacket was zipped to the chin, even though it was warm outside. The posture of someone trying to take up as little space as possible. Jamal watched her for 3 seconds. He didn't approach. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't offer advice or pull out a business card. He turned to Devin and said quietly, "Whatever she needs. Water, snacks, whatever. I've got it. Don't make a thing of it." Devin nodded. Jamal picked up his coffee and walked out. The bell chimed behind him. The woman never knew his name. 2 years ago, Jamal Williams walked into this store, and 3 words changed everything. "That's mine." He was talking about a building, but the universe heard something different. It heard a man claim responsibility. For a stranger. For a moment. For a life he didn't know he was about to change. Sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest misunderstandings. And sometimes "that's mine" doesn't mean you're taking something. It means you're ready to give. Poverty doesn't erase dignity. Wealth doesn't guarantee compassion. And the distance between someone's worst day and their best life is often just one person who chose to see them as human. Not as a problem, not as a project. Just as a person standing in a store holding $1 hoping for something better. Now, before we close, this story is fictional, but the struggles it portrays are real. In the United States, over 10 million single-parent households live below or near the poverty line. The systemic barriers, childcare costs, resume gaps, healthcare access, these are documented facts affecting real families every single day. If this story moved, you consider looking into organizations in your community that support working parents. Your awareness matters more than you think. And on a personal note, I wrote this story because I've seen it. Maybe not exactly like this, but close enough. I've watched someone choose between food and hope. I've watched someone get judged for how they looked instead of who they were. And I've watched what happens when one person, just one, decides to actually see another human being. It costs nothing to see someone. Nothing. But it can change everything. That's why I tell these stories. Not because they're fairy tales. Because somewhere right now there's a Keisha holding her last dollar. And somewhere there's a Jamal who forgot where he came from. Maybe this story reminds both of them. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I'll see you in the next one.